So in this video, we're going to build a multi-tenant task manager using Clerk organizations. Now, in the last video, we had an overview of Clerk organizations, the APIs, the drop-in components, and the different features you can use to build a multi-tenant authentication architecture for your Next.js app. And in this video, we're literally going to take what we learned there and implement it inside of an application. Now, there is an accompanying blog post that I'm going to link in the description where you can step-by-step build on top of what we have. So we're not going to build the application from scratch. I'm going to show you where we're going to start, where we have a task manager, which is just for individuals, and we're going to add the multi-tenancy so that our users can now create workspaces, and then they can invite other users to join that workspace to create projects and tasks and whatnot. Which is simple enough to be able to build and follow along with me, but also showing all the features and the architecture behind a multi-tenant app. We're going to go beyond just authentication. We're going to have a database using Neon as our serverless database and Prisma as our ORM. So you also dabble into other aspects of thinking about building a multi-tenant app, which is how you're going to manage your data. Let's just scroll down and find the repo. We're going to clone this specific branch and build this together. So let me go back to my code, git clone -b. The branch is called orgs exp and start. And then I'm going to copy the URL. So the app name is called Cozy. So let me get inside of Cozy, and I'm going to run pm-i to install all the dependencies. Now, before I jump into the code, let's check that we are on the correct branch. So it's orgs exp start. Let's open up the code editor. And now there's a README here which walks you through the similar setup that I'm going to be doing. So feel free to also have a read there as well. We can also follow along on the blog post step by step, which is what we're going to do in this video. Now, to run this app and show you where we're going to start, we need some environment variables. We need a database. So let's create those. I'm going to create my .env file. Now we're using Prisma, so we need a database URL. So I'm going to have this here. And let's go to our Neon dashboard and create a new project. I'm going to call this Cozy and create. Once this is created, you can click connect to get your pulled connection string. So I'm going to copy this and bring it back to my application. So that's the first thing that we need in terms of our database. All right, so let's save this up. All right, now let's also create an application in Clerk so we can bring in our credentials. So I'm going to also call this Cozy. So I'm doing this from scratch with you, so we can see step by step what involves in creating this. So let's get our publishable key and secret keys over here. So I'm going to copy this. Now, the first thing I want to do is pm dlx Prisma generate. This is going to generate our Prisma client, and then pm dlx Prisma db push. So it's going to push this schema to our remote database, which is Neon in this case. So now I can go pm and dev to start the local server. Let's open the application up and see what we're dealing with here. So when you're not logged in the beginning, you're going to see join the waitlist. This is a component or a way of restricting your app for signups. You can have a restricted mode, waitlist mode, and a public mode. So I'm going to go to /sign in. This is where our sign in lives. Now, it may be a good idea to also explain this from a high level. So we have our middleware. That's how we are hooking Clerk up with our application. We have the app in the layout, your regular things to hook up Clerk provider with the layout. So we have this app, which is going to be the app part or the dashboard where users can, once they signed in, create projects and tasks and whatnot. And then we have the sign-in path and the waitlist path, which are basically just rendering Clerk drop-in UI components. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually sign in. So I'm logged in now, and I now can go to the app where I can see the dashboard or the user interface for our task manager. So I can have a personal space. That's all I have right now because there's no organizations involved. And I have an inbox, so I can create a task, let's say record Clerk video. And that's a task. I can toggle it as done and untoggle it. I can also create projects. So I can create a project, let's say Clerk. And then inside of this project, I can have a task. So let's add a task here to say hello from Clerk project. So now this task is living inside of that project. So you can organize your tasks into projects. So that's our starting point. But what we want to do is add multi-tenancy to this, whereby I can have a personal space just like I have now, but I can also create organizations or think of them as workspaces, as teams that I can now then invite other people to join, and we can manage tasks and projects together. So that's the purpose of what we're going to do next. So the first step after setting stuff up is to enable organizations in your Clerk dashboard. So inside of our Clerk dashboard, where now we have one user, you can go to configure. Under organizations, you can select settings, and here you can enable organizations. Right off the bat, you're faced with some options. Now, any of the stuff that I'm not explaining here deeply enough, you can check the video that I mentioned that I did last week, where we dive deeper into all of these features and APIs, so you can get comfortable with what's available to you. But we're going to leave the default setting. The only thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to toggle this off, so I'm not allowing new members to delete organizations. We can also optionally enable verified domains, where you can verify a domain in your organization and therefore streamline the onboarding of new users. So when you verify a domain like clerk.dev, anybody with that email now can be streamlined into the application or join easier than you having to create them or invite them. So it's, for that matter, it's an add-on feature, so it's not included in the free tier, but it's an add-on feature if you want. So I'm going to save this as well. Now, right off the bat, before going into our code, I want to also talk about roles and permissions. So inside of our multitask or multi-tenant task manager, we want to also have different roles. So we want to have admins and members, as we have now. We want to give them access to be able to create tasks and read tasks. But for the sake of our application, let's also create a new role called reader that can only read the tasks and cannot write or cannot edit or cannot delete or cannot create projects, just to show you role-based access control and permission. So let's go to the roles. By default, we have an admin and we have a member. You can decide when you are inviting somebody what role you want to assign to them. And you have some default permissions. These are system level permissions that Clerk needs to operate. So let's go ahead and create a new permission. We're going to call this tasks or read tasks. Now, the naming convention for the key is org, feature, and the action that the user can take. So for example, here, org, tasks, and then read. A user that can read tasks. And let's create this permission. We're going to also create another one. We call it tasks or write tasks. This can be tasks and then the write access. A user who can write tasks. You can name them however you want that makes sense for your application. The naming convention for the key is something that you can have it standard in your app, and the recommended way is org, feature, and then action. And then you can add in names and descriptions so that it makes it easier for you to understand what this specific key or permission is. Now that we have these two permissions, let's go back and create a new role. We want to say this is reader, and let's say reader, and then a person who can read tasks. Now let's select the permissions so they can only read tasks. Let's also give them so that they can read members as well, so they can see the members of our organization, but they cannot edit or create anything on their own. So these two, and then create a role. Now that we have those two permissions, let's also go give it to the admin and member as well. So I'm going to go and edit this role, and I'm going to add the roles that we have. So read and write to tasks. Let's update this one. And then also for our member, we can also edit this and also read and write. All right, so I think we are set up on our end. Let's go back and see what's the next step. Now we want to let users to actually create and join organizations. Now, Clerk makes it very easy with its drop-in UI components, just like how you implement authentication for user management. You can just have drop-in components that allows you to manage organizations. So use Clerk as an organization management. So the component that we're going to use is organization switcher. This allows users to create organizations, onboard new users, and manage the members and whatnot. We're going to see in a second. I've also explained this more deeply in that first video. So I'll reference that video if you're not comfortable with what you see here. So we're going to go to our sidebar and we're going to basically drop in this new organization switcher down inside of our sidebar. So let's go back to our application. Now inside of our app, we have components specific to our dashboard or application. And we're going to come down on here and drop this switcher. Let's import this from Clerk. And now we have this organization switcher down in the bottom here. Right now, I'm inside my personal account, so I haven't created an organization, and I don't have any active organization, but I can go ahead and create one from here. Let's go ahead and create one from here. So I'm going to call this Frontier, just as the blog post. Let's create the organization, and let's invite a user to it. So Hamed at clerk.dev. So I'm going to invite this user. I can select the roles as a reader, member, or admin. Let's just go ahead and select this as a reader. So once we invite them and then we create some tasks, I want to show you that they cannot be able to update them or create new projects, so that we see this access control also in action. So let's send invitation and finish this up. So let's go to the app, and right now I'm actually inside of my organization. So that's the organization here. Now let's have a quick look at the manage. You have access to the profile just like a user profile, but for your organization. You can add verified domains from here, but you can also manage members. You can invite other people. You can see that there is an invitation here. You can manage the members and their roles right from here. And I can do this because I'm an admin. The creator of an organization is by default an admin, has fully system admin access controls, but you get the idea. So let's go back to our email where we should have received an invitation. So that's an invitation here. We're going to work on this a little bit later. So let's leave this for now. Go back to the next step of our blog post. So we have enabled organizations, allowed users to join and create organizations using the organization switcher. We invited our first member. And now we want to update the code. Up until now, our code is actually showing and querying our database based on the logged in user. So it just reads the user ID. So you may be familiar with the auth object in Clerk that gives you authentication state, or the user ID in this case. And you can see here when we're querying our database using Prisma for tasks, we are filtering based on a user ID. So when we're showing specific tasks or projects for users, we're just basically querying based on their user ID. We want to take this a step further and actually check for organization ID as well, so that if they are having an active organization or they have switched to their team space, we want to take that as the owner ID while querying our database, so that we are only showing the corresponding projects and tasks belonging to that organization. So that's the change that we want to make here. So let's go to our page. So this is the page that we have here. I'm going to close the sidebar. So we are checking for the user ID, but we can get the org ID out of the auth object as well. And I'm going to say if there is an org ID, so if there is an active organization, I want to default to that. So this owner ID that we're using inside of our query to get our tasks would be the org ID. Now, keep in mind that once we have this organization, I can still go back to my personal account. And when I switch out of an organization and inside of a personal account, that org ID is null. So it doesn't have any value. So if there is no active organization, so this defaults to the user ID. But if there is any active organization, I'm going to take that org ID and I'm going to use that as the owner ID of that task or of that project that I'm fetching from my database. And that's how we are isolating and associating resources in our database to a specific user or a specific organization. So let's go and see what's the next step. So that was the first step inside of our page. So when we're querying the tasks, we are actually pulling in the correct tasks and only showing the active user or the active organization. We also have to do this for the project ID. So when they select a specific project, we also want to default into the org ID if there is any, or the user ID if there isn't. So inside of our projects, we can also do the same thing here. Sorry. And then down here, I can say if there is an org ID, use that. Otherwise, use the user ID. All right. And finally, inside of our actions, which are actions that you can take to create a task, update a task, create a project, delete a project, and whatnot, we also want to take this into account. So if there is any active organization, we want to take that into account when we're storing the tasks. So then later on, when we're querying the tasks relating to this specific project or organization, we have that org ID stored as the owner ID. So we're going to add this to our actions as well. So let's go to our actions. So we have create task, and now here I'm going to say if there is an org ID, I want to use the org ID. If you're not authenticated, well, thank you very much. You cannot do this action. But if you are, I'm just going to check to see if there's any active organization. If this task you're trying to create is inside of an org, or is it like in your personal space? Basically, this is what we're doing here. And we're going to do this for all of our actions. So create a task, toggle task. So same thing. And then here, org ID. Now, the next step is actually also updating the sidebar to show the corresponding projects and tasks belonging to the user or the organization. Now, the sidebar is using ShatCN, and it's a client component. So what we're going to do here is to use organization hook, which is going to give us the active organization. And from there, we can get the org ID and use that as the owner ID, and then refresh the page to fetch the corresponding projects belonging to that active org anytime that the user switches between different organizations or goes back to their personal space. So let's go implement this. I'm going to copy this, go back to components and sidebar, and I'm going to get use user also organization. So let's bring this in from Clerk. And then down here, I can say organization, if it exists and there is an ID, otherwise use the user ID. Let's do the dot here. All right. So again, owner ID, anytime that this changes, it is going to refetch the projects that now has the organization ID as the owner ID. And if the user happens to be in their personal space, we're going to use the user ID and therefore only fetch their personal projects and tasks. So that's the change we needed to make inside of our sidebar. Now, before the next step, which is gating access using the RBAC or role-based access control using the roles and permissions we created, let's actually test everything that we've built so far out. So I'm going to go to my Neon database. I'm going to go to tables and refresh this. I'm going to go to projects. Let's delete every project that we have as well as every task that we have. So let's delete all of these. I'm going to go back to my application and refresh this. Now I'm inside of the Frontier space. Let's go ahead and create Frontier First project. And now inside of this project, I want to create a task, which is Frontier First task. All right, so I've created this. I can now go ahead, toggle this on and off. You get the idea. But I want to go to my invitation that I have sent to the other user and accept this invitation. Let's continue with Google. All right, so now I'm back in, logged in, and I can go to the app. Down in the bottom, I can see I'm already inside the Frontier organization that I just received and accepted the invitation from. I can see the project that we created on the other end. And if I click on it, I can also see the task that we have there. But right now, even though I'm only a reader, because we haven't implemented the access control from or using the permissions, I can go ahead and toggle this on and off. And this is not what we want. We have been able to share organizations and correctly associate these resources inside of the database with the correct owner ID or organization ID. But the next step for us is to implement permissions, roles, and access control. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to the documentation, and this is the next step that we're going to do. We're going to use the reader role and the two permissions that we created for the tasks write and read to define what somebody can do on the front end, but also we're going to make sure that this happens on the back end as well, and I'm going to walk you through all of it. So the first thing that we're going to do is the create task input. So inside of our project, this is a create task input. We want to disable this for people who are not supposed to create tasks. So inside of this create task, we're going to use the use auth. This is going to give us the has function. The has function, you can pass it a permission or you can pass it a role, and you can check to see if the logged in user has that specific permission. Here, we're going to create or check if they have the create or write access, as we named it, inside of our app for creating tasks. So let's go ahead and get the use auth. So I'm going to go to create task input, and I'm going to bring the use auth. Let's import this. And then I want to see if they have this specific permission. We called it write. So tasks write. So they can create. Let's just eliminate this. Now this can create variable does two things. First of all, it returns from the handle submit. So if you cannot create or you don't have that permission, you're not able to submit this form. But it also disables the input altogether. So right off the bat, if I go back on the other end where I have this user, which if you remember, we assigned the role of a reader to this new user we invited to our organization. You can see down in the bottom that my input is disabled, so I cannot create. On top of just disabling the input, we have also inside the handle submit return early if they cannot create or if they don't have this permission. We're going to also implement this from our backend as well. So we don't count only on the front end. We're going to implement this with the has function on the backend as well in the second step. But before we get there, let's also implement more controls on the front end. So in the task card, we want to prevent them from being able to toggle a task as completed. So we're going to basically do the same thing. We're going to get this can edit and the auth. We're going to go in the task card. Let me close everything we have open here in the task card. We're going to just, let's actually get rid of this can edit and replace it with this. We're going to get the use auth, which is going to give us the has function. And we are checking for tasks right. If you call them all right, you could have different naming convention for your permissions if you want it to be more granular in that somebody can write, somebody can create, and somebody can edit and whatnot. We called it right so that they can create, edit, and delete in one permission. You can be as granular as you want in this. So in the task card, the person who doesn't have the right access, they cannot even toggle a task as completed. Now, what else do we need to do? Well, if they cannot create a task, they shouldn't be able to create a project either. So again, here, we're going to read this from here. So let's go back to our, I believe this is inside of the sidebar. So let's go to the sidebar and can create project. We're going to say only if they're doing this. So let's const has from use auth. So we're getting the has function, and again, reading projects. Well, we called it this tasks and write. If you had created more permissions, such as projects, read or write, you could check that. We're grouping all of them under the task scope. Now, all we had done so far is just to limit and restrict our front end, but we want to also implement this authorization inside of our backend as well. So we're going to go inside of our actions where all of this different delete, update, and creation actions are happening, to also use the has function to check for permission. So basically, if there is no logged in user, we're not going to allow unauthenticated users to access projects or tasks. But if there is an organization ID, so if the user is already in an active organization, we want to check to see if they have the permission for the action they're trying to take, and then allow them to go ahead. So we're going to update our actions. So let's go to our actions, and now up top. So I'm going to replace this by that. Now, the auth object also returns the org ID, and that's one thing I want to mention here. So inside of our sidebar, remember, at first we used the use organization hook to get the organization and read the ID. Now that we have the use auth, we can also access the org ID here. So you don't need that necessarily. You can also read this org ID just as we were doing before. Alternatively, you can get it from the auth object as well, two different ways. The use organization is going to give you the whole organization object. So if you need to access more details about the org, you could use the use organization hook. But the use auth already gives you the active organization if the user is within an organization workspace. Now, the auth object, similar to the use auth hook on the front end, gives you the org ID and the user ID. And we're just checking to see if the user has the required permission. I'm going to speed up just copying this inside of all of our server actions, and I'll be back. Now, one thing to note that inside of the get project, I'm not going to implement that, because if I implement this, well, for getting all the projects, everybody can get the project as long as you're logged in. You should be able to read. So we don't need this. So I'm not going to copy it here. And I'm going to continue with the rest. All right, I'm done updating the server actions, and that's pretty much it. We have a fully functional multi-tenant app that allows users to create projects, create organizations, invite other members to join their orgs. You can assign different roles and control what they can do, such as creating tasks or reading tasks. So just so we give this another try. So let's go frontier, second task. I can have this going back inside of this app, inside the frontier. I can see that task. I cannot toggle this. It's disabled. And even if they get bypassed from the front end, inside of our back end, we're checking to see if this authenticated user has the necessary permission for the action they're taking. Otherwise, we're not allowing them to proceed. Now, the last step inside of the blog post is adding a custom domain. I have covered this in detail in the first video that I mentioned, so definitely check that out. It is the idea of verifying a domain inside of your organization, so it streamlines onboarding your users so that anyone with that email on that domain can be automatically joined or automatically suggested to join to your organization, which just makes it easy onboarding a lot of users if that's the case. So definitely check that video for seeing the verified domains feature. If you have any questions, like always, drop them down in the comments. I hope this was a fun application to build on top of Clerk organizations, which makes implementing multi-tenancy in your Next.js apps super easy. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.